I think, therefore I am. Four words. Rene Descartes wrote them in 1637, and with them he tried to prove he existed. Think about that for a second. A man sat alone, doubting everything, his senses, his body, even the world around him, until he arrived at the one thing he couldn't doubt, the fact that he was thinking. That is rationalism, the belief that pure logical thought is the most reliable path to truth. But here's the question we are exploring today. Can reason alone guide us? Or is there something essential we lose when we trust the mind above all else? I'm your host, and this is the Curiosity and Co podcast. Okay, let's start with a simple question. What does it mean to be rational? Is it just making smart decisions, following logic instead of impulse, being the person in the room who doesn't get swept away in emotions? Is it not crying during Pixar movies? Rationalism, the philosophy, is actually something much deeper. It is the belief that reason is the primary source of knowledge, that truth doesn't come from what we see or feel or experience, but from what we can think through logically. And that idea, it reshaped the world. It gave us modern science, mathematics, the Enlightenment, the very notion that humans could use logic to understand the universe without relying on tradition, authority, or faith. But it also gave us something else, a world where algorithms make decisions, where data trumps intuition, where we are told to be logical, as if emotions are glitches in the system. So, here's what we are going to do today. We are going to trace rationalism from its origins, those big thinkers in wigs and candlelit rooms, all the way to now, to AI, to the way you make decisions, to the questions of whether a life governed by reason is a life fully lived. And along the way, we will ask, is rationalism a tool or a trap? Let's start at the beginning. It's the 1600s. Europe is waking up from centuries of religious and intellectual authority. The printing press has spread ideas faster than ever before, and a handful of thinkers are asking dangerous questions. Chief among them, Rene Descartes. Descartes didn't just think about philosophy, he lived it. Legend has it that he spent an entire day sitting by a stove, systematically doubting everything he thought he knew. His senses, unreliable. Dreams feel real, after all. The external world could be an illusion. Even mathematics. Maybe some evil demon was tricking him into believing 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. But then he found something he couldn't doubt, the fact that he was thinking, because even if he was wrong about everything else, someone had to be doing the doubting. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And with that, Descartes laid the foundation for rationalism. The idea that reason, not experience, not faith, is the bedrock of knowledge. He wasn't alone. There was Baruch Spinoza, a philosopher in Amsterdam who argued that the universe itself operates on pure logic, like a vast cosmic equation. God, to Spinoza, was reason. Everything that happens, happens because it must. No miracles, no randomness, just necessity. And then there was Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, mathematician, diplomat, and probably the last person to know everything there was to know in his time. He believed reason could unlock the best of all possible worlds. That logic, if followed perfectly, would reveal the universe's deepest truths. Together, these three, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, formed what we now call the rationalist trinity. And their belief was radical. Truth doesn't come from the outside world, it comes from thinking. But not everyone agreed. Across the English Channel, philosophers like John Locke and David Hume were saying the opposite. They were empiricists. They believed knowledge comes from experience, from what we see, touch, taste, hear. John Locke famously said the mind is a blank slate. We are born knowing nothing. Everything we learn comes from the world around us. So you had this clash. Rationalists said reason reveals truth, and empiricists said experience reveals truth. And honestly, that debate is still happening. Every time someone says, trust your gut versus look at the data, that's rationalism versus empiricism playing out in real time. But here's the thing, rationalism did not just stay in dusty philosophy books, it changed the world. It gave us the scientific method, the Enlightenment, the idea that humans could use logic to build better societies, fairer laws, more accurate understanding of nature. It also gave us, well, we'll get to that. Okay, let us leave the 17th century for a second. Let's talk about you. You probably don't think of yourself as a rationalist. Maybe you have never read Descartes. Maybe you have, and you thought he was kind of exhausting. But here's the thing, you use rationalism all the time. Every time you make a pros and cons list, every time you budget your money or plan your week, every time you think, okay, logically, what's the best move here? That is rationalism. We trust reason to guide us through life's biggest decisions. Should I take this job? Should I move to this city? Should I end this relationship? We weigh the options, we analyze, we try to think our way to the right answer. But here's where it gets tricky. Cognitive science has shown us something uncomfortable. We are not as rational as we think. There's a researcher named Jonathan Haidt who uses this metaphor. Reason is like a rider on an elephant. The rider thinks he is in control, but the elephant, your emotions, your instincts, your gut, is what is actually moving. At the rider's job, to come up with reasons after the fact for why the elephant went where it did. In other words, we don't use reason to make decisions. We use it to justify decisions we have already made emotionally. Think about the last time you bought something you didn't really need. Maybe it was a jacket, or a gadget, or a third streaming subscription. You probably told yourself, well, it's on sale and I'll use it a lot, and it's an investment really. But if we are being honest, you just wanted it, and reason came in afterward to make you feel okay about it. So, if our emotions are driving the bus, does rationalism even work in real life? Or is it just a story we tell ourselves to feel in control? For a long time, we have thought of reason and emotion as opposites. Reason is cold, clear, logical. Emotion is messy, irrational, unreliable. Spock versus Captain Kirk. Head versus heart. We are told to set our feeling aside and think rationally, as if emotions are the enemy of good thinking. But what if that's wrong? In 1990s, a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio studied patients with damage to the part of the brain that processes emotions. These people could still reason, they could solve logic puzzles, they could analyze situations, but they could not decide anything. They would spend hours debating whether to schedule an appointment for Tuesday or Wednesday. They couldn't choose what to eat for lunch. Their lives ground to a halt. Why? Because without emotions, there was no way to assign value to options. Logic can tell you the pros and cons, but it can't tell you what matters. That's what emotions do. They tell us what we care about. Think about a decision you have made recently, a real one, not what to have for lunch, but something that mattered. Did you make it with pure logic, or did you make it because something felt right? Maybe you took a job that paid less because the work felt meaningful. Maybe you stayed in a city because you loved someone there. Maybe you chose a life's path that did not make sense on paper, but made sense to you. Rationalism taught us to trust the mind, but maybe the mind needs the heart to know where to go. The philosopher Blaise Pascal, a contemporary to Descartes, put it this way: the heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing of. Maybe the question isn't should we be rational or emotional. Maybe it is how do reason and emotion work together? Because here's where things get really, really interesting. We are now living in a world where we have built machines that are pure reason, no emotions, no intuition, just logic. And that raises a whole new question: artificial intelligence. If rationalism had a child, it would be AI. Because what is an algorithm really? But the ultimate rationalist. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't get emotional, it doesn't have a bad day and make a rash decision. It just calculates. And in a lot of ways, that is incredible. AI can diagnose diseases faster than doctors. It can predict traffic patterns, optimize supply chains, detect fraud. It can process more information in a second than human could in a lifetime. But it also can't do something humans do instinctively. It can't tell you what matters. Let's say you are designing an AI to allocate medical resources during a crisis. It will optimize for efficiency, maximum lives saved, minimum cost, perfect logic. But who gets saved? The younger over the old? The healthy over the sick? The wealthy over the poor? Logic can't answer that because it is not a question of efficiency. It's question of values. And that is where pure rationalism hits a wall. Rationalists like Leibniz believed that if we just thought hard enough, reason would guide us to the best of all possible worlds. But what if there's no single best? What if every choice involves trade offs that logic alone can't resolve? AI exposes that. It is perfectly rational, and sometimes that's terrifying. Think about recommendation algorithms: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. They are optimized for one thing: keeping you engaged. maximum watch time. That's the logical goal. But they don't care why you are engaged. Whether it's because you are learning something meaningful or spiraling into conspiracy theories at 2 a.m. Pure reason without wisdom, logic without ethics. So maybe the lesson here is not that rationalism is wrong, it is that rationalism by itself is incomplete. We need reason, absolutely, but we also need something else: empathy, intuition, the ability to ask not just what can we do, but what should we do? And that brings us to the philosophers who pushed back. Rationalism dominated philosophy for a long time, but it did not take long for cracks to appear. Enter Immanuel Kant. Kant loved reason. He spent his whole life thinking about how the mind works, but he also saw its limits. He argued that reason is great for understanding the world as it appears to us, but it can't tell us what things really are. It can't answer the deepest questions. Why does the universe exist? Is there a God? What makes something morally right? Reason, Kant said, has boundaries, and beyond those boundaries, we are on our own. Then came Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche looked at rationalism and said, "You are killing us." Too much logic, he argued, drains life of vitality. It turns everything into a problem to be solved. It makes us obsessed with truth at the expense of meaning. He believed that rationalism, especially when combined with science, was creating a world that was technically accurate but spiritually dead. We have art so that we do not perish from the truth. In other words, sometimes reason isn't enough. Sometimes we need beauty, passion, myth. And then the existentialists took it even further. Thinkers like Sartre and Camus said, life doesn't have a logical structure. There's no cosmic reason for why we are here, no equation that adds up to meaning. Meaning isn't discovered by thinking, it's created by living. And maybe that's the ultimate critique of rationalism. It can tell you how things work, but it can't tell you why they matter. Here's a question: if you could live a perfectly logical life, every decision optimized, every risk calculated, every outcome predicted, would you want to? Or would something be missing? So, can reason alone guide us? I don't think so. Not because reason is bad, it is not. Reason is one of the most powerful tools we have. But it is a tool, not a destination. Rationalism taught us to question, to think critically, to trust our minds over tradition and authority. And that is invaluable. But it can't tell us what to value. It can't tell us what makes life worth living. It can't replace intuition, empathy, art, love, or the strange, messy beauty of being human. Maybe the goal is not to be more rational. Maybe it is to be wisely rational. To use reason but not worship it. To think clearly but not coldly. To trust logic but also trust your heart when it whispers something logic cannot explain. Because here's the thing: life isn't a math problem, it's not something you solve, it's something you live. Rationalism gave us the compass, but you still have to choose where to point it. Thanks for listening, I'm your host, and this is the Curiosity and Co podcast. Until next time, trust your mind, but don't forget your heart. You have been listening to Curiosity and Co podcast, a space where we slow down to explore the questions that shape our inner lives and collective realities. It's a place for thinkers, readers, and wanderers of the mind, those who find wonder in the ideas and meaning in complexity. Here, we reflect on philosophy, science, psychology, and the way we live and relate to the world, drawing from both the timeless wisdom and modern insights. Tune in for the ideas, stay for the insight. Because at Curiosity and Co, curiosity isn't just a trait, it's a worldview.